So let's talk about Reagan because that's one of the more recent ones that you're in, and I know it's also a project that aspects of it were kind of near and dear to your heart. Um, you've considered, if I'm not mistaken, you've called this one of the more important roles you've played. Why is that?
Because first of all, I was a big Ronald Reagan fan. I mean, to me, he was the greatest president in my lifetime in the United States. And I loved his sense of humor. I like everything about him. I like his politics. I'm not going to, not 100%, I mean, but there's nobody that's 100% perfect. So, but he was my favorite president. So being invited, and again, I didn't audition for this part. I played a dissident, for Soviet dissident who escaped to America. He was working for the government and tried to explain people that all the propaganda that they hear about how beautiful life is in the Soviet Union. And you know why it happened, because Stalin invited all the famous writers and from America, from Europe, and showed them Russia that didn't exist.
Yeah, they just showed him this
Yes.
snapshot that they wanted them to see.
Yeah, it's called Potemkin Village. It's something that where they paint the grass green. It's everything is specially designed to impress those. And when they came back, they were fooled, and there were so many articles about people who were famous, and the population trusted them, and it was all fake. And this guy who I played, he was telling them that it was a fake, that the real life is much different. He was talking about famine. He was talking about gulag, and how miserable life was. That's when young Reagan first time he heard him, and there was a very good scene. Unfortunately, it's not in the film because of the young Reagan. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say that, but maybe I will not mention any names. So he had a fiancée. He was in that church where I gave a speech. He was with her, and the producers and directors, they, for some reason, didn't like the actress. And they cut all the scenes with her out of the film. So my most interesting scene wasn't there, where we had like one-to-one talk with young Reagan. They had cut it because she was in that scene. But yeah, it was good to be in a project that was involving my favorite person.
It seemed like there were a lot of actors in that movie who, and even people who weren't actors, who had roles in the movie, either not necessarily playing themselves, but playing people within the same scene. Like, I remember there being a scene that the real Pat Boone was involved in, but then Pat Boone played the role of the pastor, I think.
Yeah.
But in the scene that he was actually really at as himself when he was young, and there were a lot of interesting things in there that if you watch the movie and you kind of know the history a little bit yourself, that they're not really Easter eggs. They're just clever. And you could tell that some of these people are people that, like you, had a love of him as the president and therefore wanted to be part of this.
More than that, when I couldn't support myself as an actor, with my very good friend, we started a business. And that business was a Russian language newspaper. still exists, but I don't own it anymore, and my friends will sold it. And it's a Russian language weekly. It was an American paper, but we have a lot of journalists who immigrated working for us, good ones. And one of them was named Yuri Bizmenov. Yuri Bizmenov, if I'll spell it out for you, take a look. I think you can find him on YouTube. He was a real thing. He was a real Russian defector who dressed up as a hippie in India. He was working for the news agency, Soviet news agency in India. Dressed up as a hippie and through Pakistan escaped. And then he lived in Canada for a while. But he was doing the same thing my character was doing in the film Reagan. He was working for our paper, but at the same time he was going around lecturing people about the real works of KGB. And I strongly advise you to. You'll be surprised.
Huh.
Yuri Bizmenov, Bezmenov.
So that's interesting because, there probably were more than one, you would think, of people that would do stuff like that. But I remember in the movie that it being kind of, even though it was a kind of a shorter scene, especially since they edited out that other part, but it was a pivotal point between that and him reading, the book that made a big impact on the direction that Reagan's life took. So that part, in some sense, was playing a character made a huge impact, from what I understand, in Reagan's life overall.
It did. This Kirchman character, that was the first time he heard that everything he was reading, and it was all propaganda. It was not true.
It opened his eyes and started and planted a political seed in him that he didn't know he had, probably.
Right. Yes.
So it makes sense. We kind of skipped over Air Force One, which you were in with Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman. So first you get to work with Indiana Jones's father, and then you get to work with Indiana Jones himself. So what was it like working on that film, sit in the upper deck of the 747 with Gary and Harrison for all those takes? I mean, is there a memory that sticks out to you the most from shooting that film?
Yeah, I was like a child in a toy store. You remember I told you that before getting involved in theater, I loved all kinds of transportation. So they built a replica of a cockpit of 747. And whenever I had the chance, when we were not filming, I was sitting there flying this plane all around the world. It was so wonderful. I had two instructors. And I was, if you remember the film, I was the pilot who we took over the plane. Yeah, and I had two instructors from United Airlines, and they taught me which buttons to and why you push this and why. So I thought if I get kidnapped somewhere in the air in the real life, I knew how to fly the plane, because then I knew what is flaps, what is air brake.
That's fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and plus it was we got a pretty good relationship with Gary, a very funny man, very talented man. Harrison was nice, but he was a little starish. He was a little distant, but it was an interesting time. Everything was fantastic. I was doing before that. I was in the part. I was like recurring on Mad About You, and then I got this offer, and again, should I do the film or should I stay with the series? And just when I read the script, I knew I'll do the film.
So a role of yours that I found quite interesting is your portrayal of Anatoly Dobrynin in the film 13 Days, because you play a real-life Soviet diplomat while being an immigrant from a Soviet country yourself, while portraying one of the most important diplomatic meetings of our time, a meeting that quite possibly saved the world. What was it like acting with all those things? Kind of, did you feel like it was laying on your shoulders, or was it because it was historical? It was just you were going to do the job, or how did you approach that?
First, I read everything I could about this period. I read anything I could about Dobrynin, and I met a couple of people who knew him personally, so I could do a bit of sort of adjustment with my body, and that's about it. That's about it. It was an interesting role.
Well, that one had obviously the political aspects of it. Obviously, Reagan has the political aspects of it. And one of the things I did want to ask you was, although the Reagan movie, the story is about Reagan, obviously, it's kind of told from the viewpoint of a spy who was following Reagan. At any point in your career after you came here, especially after you used the word, when you leave, they kind of characterize you as a traitor or anything like that. And with everything being the way that it was at the time you came here, did you ever feel like maybe the Soviet government was keeping tabs on you because you became a little bit more high profile after that? Did you feel any eyeballs at any point, or is that just, the crazy, American in me, thinking more than I should about it?
I think it's crazy American.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think so. The guy who played the main KGB guy in Moscow on the Hudson, Savely, who passed away very young. He was a huge star in Russia. I wasn't. I mean, people would recognize me, but he was. I mean, there was no. You couldn't find a person who didn't know him, and he was the biggest comedian in Russian film. And he was a little nervous about it because he played a KGB man, and he told me that I kind of feel a little uncomfortable. But that was the only time when I even thought about it.
One thing I did want to ask you is, do you have any input or advice for young immigrant artists trying to find their voice in whether it be this country or new culture in general?
It's not only immigrant actors or whoever. I mean, just as we talked before, that there are a lot of negativity around, and the people try to scare you. Just believe in yourself, and if you really do, just go for it. I mean, like in the theater schools in Russia, I know people who are very successful, very famous now, but they couldn't get in from the first attempt. I mean, some of them from third, some of them in fourth. But they really they knew that that's what the life, and they became very successful and very popular. So trust in yourself more than people who try to scare you. And don't waste your time. I was listening yesterday, I was listening to a song, Enjoy Yourself, It's Later Than You Think. A guy Lombardi, I think, wrote it, or played it. And it was kind of, now when I'm almost 75, I think I would change the lyrics. Don't waste your time, it's later than you think.
Very, very smart words. Elya, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, David. Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elya Baskin.